Welcome to Call Time with Katie Birnbaum. I'm so excited to be back checking in with theater's best and brightest. I was hesitant, frankly, to get back to interviewing, I think because I'm naturally suspicious of the everyone must have a podcast mentality. But first, I'd like to point out that this is decidedly not a podcast. Maybe that's the first rule of Call Time. And second, it gave me great joy to talk with performers and theater makers, especially as we're coming up on the year anniversary of not having any theater, the longest shutdown in history. So I figured if it gave me joy and gave me joy to connect with an audience, hopefully other people were hungry for the same thing. So I'm very thrilled to be back and up to some new and old tricks, and I couldn't be more excited about my inaugural guest, the wonderful, the incomparable, the sexy, the Tony-nominated Kathryn Gallagher.
Angel.
I'm so happy you're here.
I'm so happy I'm here.
You look amazing, by the way, as always.
I was just about to say you look amazing. Wore a shirt especially for you. My shirt says me loving my friends, and you're my friend. So this is just me loving you.
I love that. I've seen that shirt on your Instagram, I feel.
You have.
So before we get into it, I will, Kathryn shouldn't need any introduction because she's so fabulous and ingrained in the theater world, but I'll give a little intro for those of you who don't know her. She made her Broadway debut in the 2015 revival of Spring Awakening, directed by Michael Arden. And if the world were not on fire right now, she'd be starring in the Alanis Morissette musical, Jagged Little Pill, for which she was nominated for a Tony. She was in one of my favorite Netflix bingeables, You, and has appeared on other TV shows like The Flash and Indoor Boys and soon to be Modern Love. And in addition to all of that, Kathryn balances her very impressive acting career with a career as a singer-songwriter, which I'm definitely going to talk about. It's a big reason why I wanted her to come on the show, because I think it makes her somewhat unique within the theater world. So welcome, Kathryn. Anything to add?
It's just hearing it all together is like, wow, that's so cool.
You've done a lot.
It's so funny, but then I wake up in the morning and it's just this constant cycle of like, why have you not accomplished anything? Work harder. So it's really nice I was like, wow, I've worked before.
I know. And we've also been like not working for so long that I think working, you've been doing things, we've been doing things, but our traditional 8 shows a week hasn't been happening in a long time. So
no, it's so crazy to look back on. My dresser, Diana, has Time Hop on her phone, and she's like an incredible archivist. So she'll just send me photos every day of like exactly a year ago today. And she sent me a photo today where I was in my dressing room and like half dressed with a sock on my head, like laying on the ground in the middle of a show. And I was like, wow, I used to do that every day. It's like mind blowing.
It's crazy. I mean, soon to be our, Time Hop year ago is just going to be like us sitting in our rooms, being on our phones.
I know, thinking that it would just be a few weeks. Like, remember on day 6, everyone was like, I can't take it anymore.
I know. It's funny to look back on social media and people's like posts in late March that were like coming out of quarantine, like looking forward to the end. And it's like, we
were wrong.
We were absolutely wrong, which brings me to my first question, which is, we actually became friends during the pandemic. And one of our first very deep chats, although all chats with Kathryn are deep, as knows, it's the best thing about you. You get to the quick, very
go in.
You go in. It's one of the things I adore about you. And I think one of the things that makes you a great actor. But one of our first chats was on this hike that we took where we really like checked in about how we were feeling about theater and our careers and our lives. And I'm wondering how you're feeling about all of that now. I feel like I'm hitting a pandemic wall personally, but I don't know about you.
I'm hitting it. I had therapy today, and it was the first time this entire year where I've been like, yep, nothing to look forward to. There's just nothing like, and obviously like I say that understanding, you know, I'm so lucky. I have so many things that I'm so grateful for. And I think that I've had a real intense drive for the past year to make things, to create, to be proactive. I think I took for granted, I discovered this in therapy today, how much working on the election was something to strive for, and phone banking. I mean, you and I we met phone banking, and we were doing that like anywhere from like once a week to like 6 times a week. So I forget that, you know, I've had these sort of like things that I've been working towards this entire year. And this is the first point where I'm really like, oh, blank slate. Okay. And it's bizarre because, you know, for the past, since 2017, I've at least had some idea that if all goes well, I would be doing Jagged Little Pill on Broadway for a year minimum, or who knows, shows close all the time, but you know, things looked good. And so this is truly the first time in the last 4 years, since I was like 23, that I have had no idea what's next. And it's terrifying.
Well, it's terrifying, but in some ways, I guess it's exciting because as you said, you've been able to do all this other work, which we're definitely going to get into. I hadn't even thought about the phone banking and all the political volunteering to talk about with you, but it's definitely like a great joy that has happened in both of our lives that we've discovered. And I think, at least I feel as a theater artist, has made me a more complete theater artist in a weird way to feel politically engaged. I don't know if you feel the same.
100%. I think so much of you know, sort of the day-to-day of being an actor or a musician or whatever is so focused on, and I don't say this in like a self-centered way, I mean, you know, what we do is we're talking, we're saying lines, we're doing all these things that are that can feel very sort of small and intimate. And I think to work for something that is so exclusively outside yourself, that is like, I mean, in some ways it's also we all want a better world. So a lot of those calls are like, I can't survive 4 more years of Trump, please don't vote for him. But I do think it's like, it's just such a shift, you know, it was this opportunity to really do something that was entirely outside my sort of own experience and daily life. And the reward, I feel like you probably feel the same, as like the joy that I felt after those phone banks, the like pure, unshakable, like we did something good today feeling. It's really hard to find that. And that I miss. and I get that, you know, with the joyful heart work that I do, and there's definitely ways, but I think phone banking it's so active. You're so actively engaged in something.
And it's so quick. As you say, the return is so quick because you can have a good call and feel like, at the very least today, I did something that kind of made an impact on someone.
Yes. Huge. Exactly. That's so well put.
Well, I would argue though that a lot of your acting work similarly has an impact, or at least strives to have an impact. And that was one of the first questions I wanted to ask you, because I feel like much of your work kind of has similar themes about agency and vulnerability and strength on the flip side of that. And I'm wondering if that's a coincidence, you think, or do you gravitate towards themes like that?
I definitely gravitate toward, I mean, I gravitate towards them, and I've been really lucky to get the opportunity to do it. I think that I love playing characters who sort of on the surface are one very obvious thing, and then just below it are like a whole sea of emotion. Because I think that, you know, sort of both Annika and Bella are Annika and you and Bella and Jagged Little Pill could not be more different on the surface, come from different backgrounds and all these things. But it was really interesting because when we were doing the very first lab for Jagged Little Pill, I was filming you at the same time.
Mm.
So there was one day I remember on my lunch break from Jagged Little Pill going to do ADR for Annika in Midtown and coming back and having that sort of like varying dialogue and thinking like, well, what's the through line? And with both of those, I realized like the reason I love both of those characters is because they have this just relentless, like they both try so hard to be heard, to be seen, to be respected, listened to, whatever it may be. And I think that that is something like striving to be heard is just like, it's like a basic human need. And I've felt so lucky that, you know, I think in both of those characters in particular, and a lot of the things I've loved doing, I've gotten to play, and especially with Bella, these really you know, play with a lot of gray areas, which I think is just so interesting. And yeah.
Musical theater.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really quite I was never, I think I've been someone that people have always had a hard time sort of pinning. Because like I'm not as an actor, I mean like as a person, like the amount of times that growing up someone would be like, yeah, when I first met you I thought you were going to be a bitch, but turns out you're not. And I'd be like, thanks so much. So I think in my own personal life I've always been battling this expectations versus reality, and like, will it be easier if I become people's expectation of me, or will it feel really bad, and should I just kind of like keep confusing people? Like, I don't know. I don't know. And I love characters that have that same sort of, you know, sort of contradiction.
Huh. That's really interesting because it also makes me think about, in a weird way, about Spring Awakening, because specifically the revival you did, because of course half of it was in American Sign Language and half of it was in English. And there too, it's about, to some extent, miscommunication and like, is the language we are using an approximation, or is it actually how we understand? So it's interesting that all of the shows you do have these weird parallels with each other.
It's really true. I don't know what it is about me that makes that I sort of get lucky enough to fit into these worlds. Nobody's ever looked at me and been like, she'll probably be great in The Music Man. Like no one's literally ever thought that. I would love to be in
I'd
The
love
Music Man.
to see it. Your My White Knight would be stunning.
Thank you so much. But I do think I have this, you know, I've been in a lot of, you know, contemporary pieces, and I think that something that as we sort of explore contemporary music, and I also think it has to do with the kind of songs that are in these shows, that they're pop songs, they're rock songs, you know, Duncan Sheik and Steven Sater, all of those songs are exploring gray areas. They're all about, I want this, but it kills me. And which is like about what so many things are about. If you really think about it, like I want what kills me. It's like the thesis statement of my life.
Yes. But that was going to be my next question, because they also all are rock pop musicals to some extent. And do you think that has to do with your songwriting and singing sensibilities too?
100%. I mean, I remember when I first saw Spring Awakening when I was 13 years old, and it was so crazy, because it was when I heard Dark I Know Well that I was like, oh, I could sing that song. And of course, that was what I ended up singing in the revival 10 years later. And I just remember so vividly, for the first time in my life, I saw voices that were like mine without me shifting into a different lane, you know, because I was doing in school at the time, Into the Woods and all these things. And I was constantly working in voice lessons to sing with a clear tone and sing and which I love doing. And I'm still, my voice teacher, Joan Later, who's just an angel from above, every single lesson, she goes, we have to do something different. And so we're singing Sondheim and we're singing everything that is sort of outside my comfort zone. But I remember vividly not knowing that there was a place in my sort of vocal comfort zone in musical theater until I saw Spring Awakening. And then when I got to do it, the coolest thing about it was that I was playing a voice. So I was also getting to play electric guitar on stage. So it got to stretch my skill as a guitarist. And then when I got to be dance captain, like that stretched my skill at being everything.
Dance captain.
That's the hardest job in the world. Holy my goodness.
I have so much respect for that. But you famously have been taking dance classes like every day.
Yes. Yes.
So you are basically a dancer. You're a triple threat.
You know what? Here's the thing. If my grandmother and mother were not both professional dancers to like, just like the most glorious dancers you've ever seen, I would probably be like, yeah, I'm not bad. But I'm like, no, I'm not good. Like, just like, I can't. I'd have a mean body roll and that's it.
Well, maybe later I'll ask for your body roll depending on how
Let's see how the night goes.
And we are recording at night, so it has a little.
Listen, freaky.
I wanted to go back to just touch on the fact, because I think a lot of people may not know exactly. You were obviously doing theater from a very young age, but where did the songwriting come in? Were they both from a very early age? I want to hear all about that balance.
Songwriting. My mom always, this is something I don't really remember doing, so we have to take my mom's word for it. But when I was like starting 2 and 3 years old, we'd be driving in the car and she'd keep me busy by saying like, okay, Kathryn, write a song about that bus. And I would just start like singing about the bus.
Wow, the creative version of I Spy. That's amazing.
Literally. And my mom is, she grew up a dancer, so she was always playing Motown in the house and Alanis Morissette and, like the house was filled with like pop rock music. And a lot of it were these confessional singer-songwriters. And I think that, I wrote my first song not with a guitar when I was 6 in first grade. It was a song called Confidence.
Ask you what the first song you wrote was.
So the first song I wrote, it was a song about confidence. There was a memorable lyric about you can do a million cartwheels in a row. You just need confidence, which I stand by. Yeah. And then I was in a band, of course, when I was 7, and I was actually the only member not allowed to write songs because I was the choreographer.
There's captain energy coming back.
I don't know what it is about me that just screams, you should be in charge of dances. But it's probably my body rolls. And
at 7.
I mean, even at 7, I was body rolling because at the time I actually was taking like, 6 or 7 hours of dance on Saturdays and Sundays. So I was better then than I am now. That's the truth.
I feel like I was like smarter and better as a kid than I am now, 100%.
Don't you think about like what we knew in high school? Like the fact that I knew so many presidents' names and the years of wars.
I could have a whole other like interview discussion about, I found old chemistry books the other day and I was like, I don't even know what any of these words mean. But we're getting off track.
Okay, sorry.
The first
songwriting
and how it came to be.
So then I started playing guitar. I started taking guitar lessons when I was 8. And then basically I hadn't written a song yet on guitar. And then my whole world sort of flipped upside down when I moved to LA when I was 11 and I started taking guitar lessons there. And then I remember one afternoon very vividly, my guitar teacher said, if you you can just put these 2 chords together and then you can just sing whatever you want on top of it. And then that's a song. And it was like, just understanding that I could choose the chords and then I could write the song was like, I was off to the races then. So the first song I ever completed was a song called I'm Okay that I wrote in response to, I found an audition online for Camp Rock, which was then called like Rock Camp, the musical or something. And I really wanted to audition for it. My parents said no. And so I slammed the door and I wrote this song called I'm Okay, which was then the first song I ever like completed. So that was it.
I love that story. Wow. And do you think of your music career and your songwriting as being symbiotic with your acting career? Like, do you think the two feed each other?
I think that when I was growing up, it was a different world. Like I really thought I had to choose one. I thought that, I think I was so passionate, as I still am, about writing songs and playing guitar. And I thought, well, if I had to choose one, I'll do this. And then maybe later they'll let me act in something. I was like, maybe if I write a good enough song, they'll let me act in something and then I can just sneak in. And, I had a lot of encouragement when I was in high school. I got signed to a record deal when I was 15. Then that fell apart the following year. I had all of these things that were like, this person wants to sign you, and this head of this label's coming to see your show. I played my first show at the Whiskey when I was 15. And, I had heads of record labels saying, like, you're not going to be in school next year. We're going to have you opening for so and so. Like, I had all these promises. So school and a future in anything just felt sort of predetermined. And I was really, I started going into the studio every weekend when I was 14. And like, that was sort of this trajectory that I was on that felt so sort of clear cut. And then I think that, the idea of becoming an actor, again, didn't really come back into I mean, I was doing musicals in school the whole time and I loved them and I worked hard and I took acting classes. But the idea of pursuing it didn't come back around until I went to school to study songwriting, dropped out. And then I had a music manager who had another client auditioning for the American Idiot tour. And he was like, would you ever be interested in doing this sort of thing? And I was like, yeah, I'm like a theater geek. And he was like, oh, okay. And then I almost booked it. But going through like the dance calls and all that sort of like got me fired up. And then about a year later, I got a call from Ben. And was like, my friend Michael loves your voice and is going to call you. And then Spring Awakening. So it was really like, out of my hands, it felt.
Yeah. I know you and I have talked a lot about whether theater people are able to do other things, quote unquote. And we've talked a lot about how there definitely was a perception when we were young that you had to pick, that if you were going to be a really good actress, you definitely couldn't devote time or energy to anything else. And
100%.
do you think that that has fully changed? Like, do you think it is possible to be both? I mean, I think to some extent you are proof, the proof is in the pudding, to be both an accomplished actor and an accomplished singer-songwriter, but I'm wondering if that's how you feel, or if there are days when you're like, oh my God, it's still the same.
I mean, I doubt what I'm doing every day when I wake up. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I think that the parts of my life that I feel like have sort of been these like beautiful blessings in disguise have been the fact that the successes I've had, I could never have planned. I think that I was so surprised by how much I fell in love with acting. Like I never thought that to speak quite frankly, I just didn't think I had the body. So I was like, well, no one's going to put my body shape on television. Um, and I went on my first diet when I was 12 years old. Like I've been, trying to fit into a shape that doesn't fit my body since as long as I can remember. And I would say the driving force behind me thinking that a career in acting wasn't for me was because I didn't see any women on camera that had my body shape. And that changed as I grew up, and it's so different now. And of course, there's so much more opportunity. And now that I've learned so much more about about misogyny and the roots of all of these things, it's like my mind is blown. But it's interesting because I just didn't think it was in the cards for me to be just an actor, because I thought that my value was in my voice exclusively. And as I started, I sort of fell into Spring Awakening, and that really, I remember I auditioned for a play between productions of Spring Awakening, and I got it. And in it, it was a straight play, and there was like this massive monologue that involved like crying and it was like an intense moment, and I loved it. And I was like, oh, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this right. And that was when I got a coach and I started training, and I was like, I'm not going to be an actor who, I'm not going to half-ass it. And I really wanted to take it seriously. And I also think being an actor's kid, I was kind of like, no, I'm not my dad. But here I am.
I was going to say, I would be remiss not to mention, I'm sure most people know, but you come from this storied theatrical family. As you said, your mom and your grandmother are dancers, and your father, of course, was Sandy Cohen on the OC. I, of course, only know him as Sky Masterson from the 1992 Guys and Dolls revival. All of my friends think I'm a huge nerd for that being the major association, but that's fine.
Love it.
And because I'm close with you, I know that you, as I'm sure anyone can imagine, have fears about sort of nepotism in artistry. And I'm wondering if you see if you see your music career as sort of the answer to that question, and B, if as you've worked extremely hard, like you're one of the hardest working actors that I know, and I think anyone watching this interview could tell that.
That's so nice. That's like that's the compliment to me that means the most in the world, is to that. So thank you.
Well, I also just think, I mean, personally, I will just say that I don't think anyone, regardless of where they come from, get anywhere without being the hardest working person in the room. But I'm curious if you think both of those aspects, your work ethic and your desire to do other things, come from that sort of existential question in your life.
I think that, especially going into Jagged Little Pill, because I knew Bella's, it is a musical, but my role within it is a very acting heavy role. And I think, I was really both excited by the task and really intimidated by it. And I think so much of that is, I do expect, and I know from, my favorite critics that I've heard throughout my life, that there is a level, I think, of, oh, well, she only got that because, and da da da. And there's so many things that I do know because of my dad, that I'm so grateful. And, of course, anyone is going to hear a million negative things said about them. And so, you try and brush it off. But I do think the upper hand I've really gotten from my father is understanding that, like, you have to have a hard work ethic. You have to have, extreme sort of dedication to the task at hand. You have to study. You have to, if you can coach, if you can do all of these things, like, you have to sleep. You have to go home early. So these things that you learn when you've had a career like my dad's, that, they're usually harder in lessons. And there's so many things I think so many ways that I've benefited from his, his career, that's really just an understanding of what it's actually like to be in a Broadway show. And I think that I'm less so now aware of sort of the, oh, she only got that because of her dad. I think that's sort of, but you know what? It's actually an interesting point that you draw, that, like, I think maybe one of the reasons that I do work so hard is because my biggest fear is someone thinking that I'm entitled, or that I don't deserve to be where I've been, where I am, and, of course, people will say these things. And I also think the added thing of, being a songwriter is such an exposing thing, my songs are very honest. And I think as an actor, there is something to be gained by maintaining sort of a mystery, because so you can seamlessly become a new person. And for me, it's like, I don't talk about my personal life or who I'm dating or whatever that may be. But when the record comes out, what happened on my birthday in 2019. You know what I mean? It's like, there are certain things to be discovered. So I think it is it's constantly juggling. And then the ultimate, result of all of that is realizing that you just can't control anyone's opinion. So the only thing I can control is showing up, working hard, and being kind. And if I've done all three of those things, then that's all I can do.
That's out of your hands.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was going to follow that up with asking if those things would be your primary advice for people who, not only just for actors, but people who want to similarly carve out their own, unique pathway within the industry, because I think that's, as I've been saying, something I really admire about you too.
So nice. I think that um there's so many things that I wish I knew when I was younger, but I don't actually think. I think you can know things before you believe them.
Mm.
And I think I don't even know if I believe, in my weakest moments, if I believe the advice I give. But I do think that, you know, the more you are yourself, the more you'll be remembered after an audition. The more, when the right role comes along, people are going to know it's yours. The more you're going to feel good. Like, I know for me, I think it's, I've never fallen into a type. I've never been obviously an ingenue. I've never been obviously the bad girl. I've never been like, no. And I think that it's always been this thing for me in my personal life, even, of like, well, where do I fit? The topic of so many songs I've written, I think, has been sort of like this, trying to understand, well, people assume I'm this, but I feel like this. And, a lot of the times now we're in a pandemic, so like, duh, I stay home. But it's oftentimes like, I lead a very quiet life. And I'm like, well, do people think I don't because I said this in a song? So it's trying to understand the way people view you, that you're never going to get the answer right. So the more you can sit comfortably in who you are, the more what's meant for you will be able to find you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
That
that's really true. But harder, of course, for women, as we've sort of danced around in this conversation. And I think another thing that I think is really cool about many of the roles that you've played, like Annika, like Bella, um, and like your role in Spring Awakening, frankly, um, have been, I don't want to call them strong women, because that sounds a little too, they're not exactly, that sounds a little too like Rosie the Riveter, like we can do it, but they're vulnerable, they're multifaceted women. And I'm hopeful that the theater is creating a space for multifaceted women, both on and off stage. But I'm curious for whether you think that is increasing.
I think so. I think that, I feel so spoiled because most of the jobs I've had have been, you know, written by women, executive produced by women or queer people. And so the jobs that I've gotten are telling generally stories that I naturally relate to from people that naturally lived these lives. And so I think that that's something that is rare. And on Jagged Little Pill, it was Diablo Cody, Diane Paulus, Alanis Morissette. It's like, are you kidding? And then on you, it's Greg Berlanti, Sarah Schechter, Sarah Gamble. It's like these, I'm so spoiled. And so I think that what happens is the characters I've played are naturally more fleshed out than often like a lot of the things that we've grown up as, because they're written by people who've lived these lives and understand the complexities. And, while I don't believe that every female character has to be written by a woman, that would be impossible. I do think that for so long in our industry, there's been one type of girl or one type of funny girl and one type of smart girl and one type of pretty girl. And when you grow up with that, you think, oh shit, am I going to be pretty or funny? Well, let's see what people have to say about me. Oh, I'm not pretty. Guess I got to find a personality. It's like, and you start, what you see on screen starts to define what you think you have to live up to or sort of fall into. And I've been so lucky that the roles that I've gotten to play have been these women who've, especially Bella, I think so much of what we've seen in the last few years with the Me Too movement is, so many people saying, well, why didn't she speak up sooner? And, well, she was drunk and, she's got a pass and all these things. Like, that I think for so long is this thing that, you know, rape is what happens in an alley with a knife to your throat. And to get to play a character who defied all of those expectations, and you know, where I knew in the audience every night there would be people sitting there conflicted about how they felt. um did she deserve it? As if like that's even a thing. But every night when I did know and the lights came up, I would see people's faces, and I would see people that I was like, you're very uncomfortable now, and you don't like me, and you've experienced this before, and you know someone who did. And just understanding, you know, that playing characters with sort of navigate complex situations and complex emotions within themselves bring up important questions in our society. So I've been really lucky for that.
I feel like the theme of our chat has been, in many ways, not having to choose, not having to be this or that, not having to be a specific thing, which I think is important on stage in the stories we tell, but also important off stage in our own personalities and the way we represent ourselves, especially as women, as you said. I don't want to end on such a note. So I have to mention, of course, you're Tony nominated for that role for Bella.
So cool.
It's so cool and such a testament to how hard you work.
Yeah.
But it also came in the summer in the height of a global pandemic when you hadn't been doing the show for months. So I'm curious how you've been able to balance that joy. Have you been able to feel joy about it? Or is it just, I don't know, this weird thing?
It is this weird thing. I think, you know, I really was not expecting it, and I don't know how to really explain that more than I watched Miss Americana, and it was this scene where Taylor
I was waiting, which of us was going to bring up Taylor? I should have a stopwatch for the show on when I or my guest mentions
brings
Taylor.
up Taylor. I mean, honestly, I remember watching her find out that Reputation was not nominated for the main categories, the Grammys. And she was like, I just have to make a better record. And I was like, I just have to be a better actor. Nothing had come out yet, but I was like, it's okay, because I'm just gonna work harder. And I remembered that thing. I was like, I have to work hard, I have to do these things, and da da da. And then I went into therapy, because Thursdays at 12:30 is when I have therapies. And that's
when I know I don't get a text back from Kathryn.
It's so true. I'm a really good texter backer,
Really
but
good.
not when I'm in therapy.
As you should. Take that time.
Nancy deserves better, you know? And so I was like on the phone with my therapist, and I was like, hey, this thing is happening today. And I feel really proud because I worked as hard as I could have in the show, and it's such a complicated year, and, you know, and it doesn't mean anything, and da da da. And I was like, so if I get a call from my manager, he's gonna probably let me know what happens. And she was like, oh, okay, like, you know, we keep talking. And then I get a call from my manager like halfway through therapy, and it's just screaming, which was really cool. And then I cried, and called Nancy back, and I was like, hey, I just got nominated for Tony, and I have to call my mom. And she was like, what? And I was like, I know. And so it was a really nice day. And then our friend Fran, we hung out, which was really nice. We went for a walk, and that was sort of, and then I had a song coming out that night. That's what it was. It was a crazy day because I had already had a song release coming out. And so then it was like my phone blew up, and it was this really exciting 24 hours. And then it was just like, when are they? No one knows. And usually you have a show that night and there's things, but instead it was just like, well, back to phone banking. Yeah. And even still, we have no idea when they are. And so it's also cool because it just feels like a longer celebration of our show. And, but yeah, it's bizarre. It's so bizarre. I don't, it's a moment you dream of your whole life. And then there you are in your pajamas on a Thursday afternoon in therapy. And
there's no way around getting around the weirdness of the time, even with great joy. I mean, even when you were talking about doing your song and seeing people's reactions, I felt this stab in my heart for how long it's been since we've had this really organic connection with the audience. And I think people are starved for it and they're hungry for it. So the good news is that when the Tonys eventually happen, who knows? I have no inside information.
Who knows? Me either.
I feel like it'll be even bigger and better. And to the extent that theater is going to come back bigger and better, it's all going to come back bigger and better.
It is. I think it's really, you know, the theater community has seen a lot of things, but it's never seen anything like this. And there's just it's such a resilient group of people that comprise our entire community, from stagehands to dressers to cast creatives. Everybody has worked their entire life to get to this point. And I just know that this sort of collective joy that we will feel that first day back in the theater, like I'm just gonna lose it. I'm so excited. And I think we all are coming back with such a fresh perspective and an appreciation, that, I think, and, I'd be remiss not to say, like, there's so many people that did not survive this year. And so for me, it's like, thinking about everything in my life now is like, well, I get to do this. Like I get to show up again. And so there's just like sort of, gratitude infused in everything I do, that I think, when you're like 27 and going to work and you're tired, it's easy to forget, um, that every day is not a given. And I think this year has really put that into perspective. And of course, losing Nick really put that into perspective. Um, and so I think it's going to be, the community is going to be more fired up and, creative and artistic and enthusiastic more than ever.
I totally agree. And I've heard such different information about whether people want to talk about this, like whether it's just beating a dead horse to be like, oh, theater community, feel bad for us, but it's not really feel bad for us, even though to some extent it is, because as you said, people in actors equity don't have health care. It's in a global pandemic. It's nuts. But it also is worth exploring, I think, as you say, the ways that theater is going to change, both
Yeah.
worse in that many people won't have survived, as you say, and for the better in terms of the conversations we've been forced to have about equity and inclusion in many respects, and also just generally about not taking things for granted and the joy of it, as you say. So I'm very excited for it. The
I'm
last thing
excited.
I wanted,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt,
No.
is a segment that I am calling the Thank You Five segment. For
Oh
those
my
of you
gosh.
who don't know, in keeping with the call time theme, which of course I should have explained probably at the top, that's when you're called. It's when you have to be at the theater or at rehearsal. So it's sort of a check-in time, as I've been doing with Kathryn. And Thank You Five is when the actors and stage crew and everyone else is alerted by stage management that it's 5 minutes until top of show, until curtain. So when you hear this is your 5 minutes, you say Thank You Five to acknowledge that. But my version of this is going to be 5 rapid fire questions that you just have to answer first thing that comes to your head. Not unlike Vogue 73 questions, but I have a lower budget than Vogue. Sorry to tell you. So it's just 5.
Okay.
All right, you ready?
I don't know. Yes.
One of them I feel like we already sort of covered, but I think it's still going to be good, which is my first one. First thought you had when you got your Tony nomination.
Are you sure? That's what I said to my manager. Are you sure it was my name?
Amazing. Favorite Taylor Swift bridge?
Cruel Summer.
Ooh, amazing. Weirdest thing you've done backstage?
Oh boy. Everything. Everything. Probably at ART body rolls to Celia while she's on stage to make her break, body rolling behind a panel halfway on stage that only Celia could see me while she was performing a love song.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Last thing you texted or voice memoed, because I know you're a voice memo girl, Derek Klena.
Oh my God, should we? Oh wait, I'm on my phone. It was probably, what was it? You know what? It was probably something from this book, because he made me this book that's a whole book of things I want Bam Bam to know when everything feels terrible. And like, for example, number 15 is, I wish I could take away your, and he said, Crocs and or mullet. So it's probably something along those lines. It's roasting each other.
You famously love Crocs. It's true.
I do.
And my last question in the Thank You 5, Broadway dream role.
Mama Rose.
You would kill it.
Thank you. I did it when I was 13 and I'd like to take another stab at it.
Wow. Because you really fully understood it at 13, I'm sure.
I did. I really understood the depths of it. Motherhood, all of it.
All of it. I'm surprised you didn't say Marion the Librarian, given our discussion of—
Damn it! I do also want to do Into the Woods again. I want to do The Baker's Wife.
What did you play initially?
I played The Baker's Wife, and then I also, in like the high school production, played one of the stepsisters.
Oh, amazing. I too have been in Into the Woods twice, but once was in junior.
You must have been a wife.
Well, I was Baker's Wife in the junior version. Cool. Sadly, didn't get to do Moments in the Woods, and then Little Red in the next one.
I would love to see your Little Red.
Someday, casting directors, hit me up.
Yeah, for real. Hit us up.
Well, I know. Kathryn, do you have anything else you want to say that you feel like I missed or anything?
Just that I love you, and this was so fun. It's so cool to like do this with someone who I'm like actually know, and you know me. It was like, this was so fun, and it's just like, was such a blast, and I love you.
It's so fun for me too. And as I said at the top, I hope that because we've had all this time without theater, I feel like in some ways it's a blessing, because when other time do we have this much time to get into it and have the important discussions that are often left to the wayside? And we all have the time now, so why not use it?
Ain't that the truth?
Well, thank you, Kathryn, for your time and your lovely energy and spirit. Thank you for those of you who are watching. I really appreciate it. And please tune in next time. I have a really exciting slate of other guests soon to be revealed. And it's only going to get better. Thank you for tuning in for Call Time.